How's that? Hello, everybody. I was just testing you. I see you guys all stuck with me through that nightmare. So, if it wasn't for technical issues, you wouldn't even think you were on my live stream. You'd think this has to be somebody else's live stream because Andy always has technical issues, right? I apologize. Like I said. Okay, so the first clay I ever found was wet. It was at a lake, and so it was already plastic, and it was easy for me to identify that way. But all the clay around here, most of the clay around here, in the southern part of the United States or the southwestern part of the United States, is dry because it's desert, it's arid country, and so when you find it, it's hard, it's rock-like, and it doesn't look like clay. So I'm going to be showing you pictures throughout the presentation today to try to so you can learn to identify clay yourself. But if you have already identified clay, that's not the point of this presentation. The point is to talk to you about what to look for and what makes a good clay. Okay. So I think probably anybody that's trying to get into traditional pottery or primitive pottery, finding good clay can be the most daunting challenge of all, because where do you start, right? And if you don't have clay, it's hard to get started making pottery. I mean, you can use commercial clay, and I am formulating a video right now about using commercial clay for primitive pottery. But so that's your starting point. You have to have that clay to make the pottery, and the clay can be very hard to find or figure out how to find. In my case, I was walking over it and driving past it all the time. I just didn't know what I was looking for. So hopefully we can kind of overcome that problem here today. So let me talk about what makes, this is dry. So this is an example of dry clay. You can see this kind of dry, like sandstone deposit sticking out there. And above it, we have that crackled texture. That crackling right above that sandstone slab shows us that there's a good plastic clay right along the top of that. And that's kind of what you're looking for in this dry country. But it can be very daunting trying to figure out what to look for. So the first thing we're going to talk about that helps us, what we're looking for in clay is we're looking for something that's easy to process. So sometimes processing the clay can be a huge pile of work. And I think unless you really like that work, that can be a challenge. That can be a barrier to entry. You don't want to have to put in a lot of effort to get the clay into a plastic state that you can build with. You want to be able to do that easily because that's the point. That's what you're after. In this case, this is a metate and a mono. So this is what is traditional here in the Southwest. The Native Americans, lots of Native Americans to this day, grind their clay on a mono and a metate like this. This is mine. This is I own 40 acres over by the Chiricahua Mountains, and this is a metate that's out there, and I leave it out there, but I use it for grinding clay when I have workshops out there. So that's what this is a picture of. And so that's the traditional method. And so in a lot of cases, you can just grab the clay, grind it up, maybe throw a little temper in it, and it's good to go. I mean, that's not super hard. Sometimes it's a lot more difficult to make the clay usable. This is a picture of one of my students at my workshop up at Q Ranch and grinding clay on a metate. It's a little bit laborious, but it's not as bad as some other things. But that's all subjective too, right? Like what's hard work for you may not be hard work for me. Like this might be hard on your back. This might be hard on your knees. There are other ways to do it that may use different muscles that may be harder on me than they are on you, right? So I use this corn grinder like this. It's basically just a Mexican grain mill, and it works really good. It grinds up the clay. It grinds up temper. If I'm using like broken sherds for temper, I can just throw broken sherds right in it and they just grind right up. You can put in rocks, most rocks. Some rocks resist grinding in the grinder. So that depends. Like some clays, where I dig them, they have rocks naturally in the clay. And those rocks will just run right through it and just turn into sand in the grinder, which is fine because you need temper in your clay anyway. Some other places I dig clay, the rocks are really hard. I don't know what they are. They could even be little pebbles of like obsidian or something. They're kind of black, but when you get one of those in the grinder, it just stops you. And so you got to kind of back it up and pull them out. So that can be also making it more difficult to process your clay depending on how hard those rocks are that are in it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then wet processing. So I did a video last summer about wet processing clay. I think dry processing is easier to me. That is grinding it on a metate or on a corn grinder. But a lot of people prefer wet processing. That is, you get it wet, you stir, you mix it all up, and you pass it through a screen to remove the larger particles, or you may even levigate it. That is, letting the larger particles settle in a bucket and then pouring off. And then you have to get the water. Now that you put water in the clay, you've got to get it out because it has to be a lot drier than this, right, before you can make pots out of it. So in this case, I was pouring it in this bin to sit out in the sun to dry. Maybe not so laborious, but certainly more time consuming because you have to wait for that clay to dry. And that's another consideration. So different clays require different levels of processing, right? Some clays might have a lot of silt in them, and you have to levigate to remove that silt. Some clays may have a lot of really hard rocks that resist grinding. These are all things that you consider when you're thinking, is this a clay I can use on a regular basis, or is it kind of a pain in the butt to process? So let's look at the next one. Here's the pillowcase. So the one way to do it is to set it in like a bin and let it dry out, like I was showing in the last picture. Another way to do it, once you have that liquid clay, you can pour it into a pillowcase and let it sit out in the sun, and that pillowcase is going to like ooze moisture out, and that'll help dry out the clay. It's another way to do it. Now here's one. This was a clay I was using for a slip. That is, I was just painting the outside of a pot with this white clay. But I had trouble getting all the lumps out of it when I was mixing it as a slip. It just resisted. And so I thought it still has moisture in it, causing those clay particles to stick together. And so I took to oven drying it. I would take the clay, I would spread it on a baking sheet and put it in the oven as high as my oven would go and bake it for like 30 minutes. And that would dry out that clay fully. So then I could put it in water and it would slake down a lot smoother. So these are different things you might have to do to process clay. And these are all things to consider when you're like, yeah, this is the clay I'm going to use, going forward all the time. Or, you know what, I'm going to look for a different clay because this clay takes a lot of processing. Okay. Now here's a picture of my friend Bobby Silas when we were collecting clay up at Hopi. So this is up on Antelope Mesa at the Hopi Reservation a couple years ago. I think it was 2019. Collecting clay, and this is what Hopi clay looks like. It's kind of this gray color, thick beds of this gray, and you can see it has those angular chunks. It's got that kind of crackled texture, and there's a big overhang of sandstone above it. And a lot of those clay beds up at Hopi are like that. They're in between layers of sandstone. So that's another example of what to look for. I'm going to go back and look at the chat now and catch up on your questions. Okay. Yeah. Lots of sound off. Hey, Bobby's here. Good to see you, Bobby. What color of clay is the best quality? No, you can't judge clay. Abbas Duman, you cannot. Abbas Duman asked what color of clay is the best of quality. You really can't judge it by the color. I have some clays that are really good that I like that are red. I have other clays that are red that are just terrible, right? I have some clays that I really like that are gray. I have other clays that are gray that are just horrible. So, you can't judge by the color. You've got to treat every clay is different, and you have to treat it individually and test it. Make a little test bowl, see how it does for building. Fire it, see how it does in firing. It's just impossible to judge by color, but you can. So let's say I'm trying to make a certain type of pottery, like Anasazi black on white pottery. I would want to find certain colors of clay to make that authentically. And so I do go out in the field and look for certain colors of clay. I just don't I don't judge them based on their color because they could be terrible and they could be good, based on their color. All right, back to the questions. I got here, so I missed the tech issues. Mark Gibson, good for you. It pays to come in a little late, I think. Well, from Pakistan. Hey, got somebody here from Pakistan. Beautiful metate, says Jay. Thank you. Yeah. Temper. Heidi asks, what is temper? So all your clays need some level of temper. And temper is just non-plastic materials that are added to the clay. So it could be sand. It could be grog. Grog is just fired ceramic that's ground fine. It could be diatomaceous earth. It could be volcanic ash. Generally, as a general rule of thumb, I put about 20% temper, non-plastic material, things that are not clay, things that are going to add some grittiness to it, to the clay body. So you are going to add temper to pretty much any wild clay that you find. And most commercial clays have a little bit added to it anyway. You have to have that to help it dry evenly. Especially the stickier the clay, the more you have to kind of open it up. Okay. What kind of stone is that metate made of? Jay Say asked what kind of stone the metate is made of. I think it's some kind of a tuff. So my property is over by the Chiricahua Mountains, and they are volcanic in nature, and it's a very soft stone. I think it's some kind of tuff, but what's that? Chiricahua National Monument that is that has all these hoodoos, right? And they're made of. It is like compressed tuff, but there's a name for it. I can't think. It might be that material. I'm glad to be here. Clay from my garden is dark brown, almost black. Settles in levitation in a few hours. Is workable. Is that silt organic matter useful in temp? Yeah, Sam wants to know about his black clay. And I'm going to talk about black clay in a little bit. Mostly that black color is organic matter. And, you know, it may have silt in it. I don't know. But I don't usually use silt as temper. But I think you probably could. Love that yellow clay. Yeah, yellow clay is amazing. Is that Hopi clay only fired using coal at high temp, or could it be? No, most Hopis fire with sheep dung, and that, I don't know, it only gets to 850 or something Celsius. So it can be fired at relatively low temperatures. I mean, because it's a gray clay, I don't know if it would do like my Salado firings are like 700, 720 Celsius. That might be a little low for that gray clay. I don't know, but yeah, the Hopi. It can be fired at lower temperatures, yeah. Almost any clay can, actually. Never heard that term, just grog. Thanks. Yeah, so grog, Heidi, grog applies to ground-fired ceramics, whereas temper, so all grog is temper, but not all temper is grog, right? So grog is a type of temper, but sand, of course, is not grog because it's not fired ceramics. Volcanic ash is temper, but it's not grog, okay? All right, I'll go back to my presentation now. So we talked about easy to process. Let's talk about workability. So that's really where the rubber meets the road on a clay. How easy is it to work with, or difficult, as the case may be? All right. You want a clay that's going to have plasticity, a certain amount of plasticity. You know, you don't want it like people email me or message me all the time. Hey, I found this really great clay in my yard, near my home, you know, on vacation, whatever. And when I try to make something out of it, it cracks. Well, it's lacking in plasticity. So all clays are different. Some have more plasticity, some have less. And some have too much plasticity. If it's really sticky, you can't hardly work with it because it just sticks on everything. It's probably like a ball clay. It's super plastic. So, you know, there's a spectrum in plasticity, and you want something that's plastic, but not too plastic. You don't want it to stick to you. So adding temper can reduce the plasticity of your clay. So, you know, the best thing to do is just do some experiments. Just take the clay and just wad it up. See how it feels in your hands. Roll it into a little coil. You know, just test that plasticity. And then if it feels good, if you feel like it's pretty plastic, try making a little pot out of it. Some people like to do test tiles, but I find that if you make a test tile, it doesn't really test the workability of the clay. It doesn't test how good it is for building with. It just, you can test the shrinkage, or you could test how it fires and that kind of thing. But I like to make a little bowl, just a little small bowl, and then fire it. And that gives me a good idea how that clay is going to do, how it does for building, how the shrinkage is, how it does in firing, the whole thing. So that's something you want to keep in mind. And the shrinkage is the other thing we want to talk about. All clay shrinks. So clay is defined as expansive. When it gets wet, it expands, it gets bigger. And then when it dries out, it shrinks. And so you make a pot, the clay is this much, you know, the pot might be this big, but then after it dries, that pot is this big, right? It'll shrink about, 10% or something as it dries. And so you don't want too much shrinkage. One, you don't want your pot to, you make a pot this big, you don't want it to be this big, right? You want it to stay roughly the size you make it. But more than that, extreme amounts of shrinkage can lead to a lot of cracking in your pottery. So clays that have a high amount of shrinkage, they're useless as pottery because you just can't add enough temper to keep them from cracking as they dry. So the first clay I ever found, earlier I talked about the first clay I found was at a lake. I was like 16. I took it home and I made a pot and broke. And I made a pot, I dried it, it broke again. So then I went to my art teacher who taught ceramics at high school, and I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, you have to add temper to the clay. All our clay here in the studio has grog added to it. And so then I added some sand to it, and it cracked. And I added more sand, and it cracked. And finally, eventually I realized that this clay was no good, but it took me a long time because it was the first clay I'd ever tried. So, you want a clay that's not going to shrink too much, right? The least amount of shrinkage is optimal. And that's really what I look for workability. So workability of clay, we're looking at plasticity, wet strength, and shrinkage. Abbas Duman says, how can you know in which temperature clay burns fully? So you just have to test it out, Abbas. You basically, if you've got a new clay you're trying to test, you make a pot, you let it dry, you fire it. Now you know that it has good workability because you made a little pot. You know it doesn't shrink too much because it dried without cracking. You know it goes well through the fire because it fired at a low temp at first, right? And then to know, I fire fairly low. I fire at like 750 to 800. That's my usual temperature. And then if I was going to fire in like an electric kiln, for example, like most of you probably have electric kilns, you take that little pot, you put it in a bigger pot that's already made with, like a stoneware clay or something that you already know can handle higher temperatures. So you put that tile or pot, whatever your test thing is, you put it in another container that's going to hold it in case it melts. And you put it in the fire and you fire it up to, cone 04 or whatever, you fire it higher and then see if it melts. And if it goes through that, then you fire it higher and see if it, and once it starts breaking down or melting or kind of cracking apart, then you know where the top end of that clay is. You just have to test it. Most clays are going to be okay at about, 750, 800 C. Some clays will not mature at those temperatures, but they're rare. Most clays will do fine at those low temps. So start low. And if you're firing like I am, if you're firing outdoors, just fire it. It's not going to get too hot for it in an outdoor fire. But it could get too hot for it in an electric kiln for sure. This picture is a ditch. This is a good example of a really thick clay bed, this kind of a greenish clay bed. And you can see it's just, 12, 18 inches below the surface. You've got kind of some silty soil on top there. And then you've got that crackly texture of that green clay there. It's just beautiful. And, just drive around out in the outdoors and you find things like this. Of course, if you lived in a wetter climate, there'd be more vegetation. You might have to take a little shovel or a spade and kind of dig in there and look. But it's the same everywhere. Even if in a damp climate, that clay might be there, it just might be all covered with grass, and you have to kind of probe into it to see that it's there. But it's there. Okay, so let's talk about the firing test then. To see, then once you've got your clay and you found that it has the workability you're looking for. You want to do the firing test. So these are some test tiles I did. It's really nice to just, if you use, these were made with like a cookie cutter. So you could get a cookie cutter and you just pop these out. And then when they dry, you can measure them and you know how much they dried because you can look at the, measure the cookie cutter and measure the tile and you can see the shrinkage and you can get a percentage of what the shrinkage rate is, which will help you. And then fire it. So these have, I've written on them what they are. Some have temper, some don't have temper. So this one was tempered with diatomite, obviously. Different things, you can write on them what they are. You could try different. The one on the bottom there has organic paint. The red one is obviously testing some kind of a red slip or something like that. So, test tiles are a really good way to just, without expending a lot of energy and effort, without having to take a whole bunch of clay. When I go to collect clay, I just use like a sandwich bag. I don't take much. That way I can test it before I know if I want it, right? And this is a good way to just test those clays quickly without spending a lot of time. And then you can see the color it fires to. You can see if if it warps in the firing, if it melts, right? You can learn a lot just by making some tiles and firing those. Lori Three Dogs, hey, that firing you did last week was fantastic, Lori. I really appreciate seeing pictures of that. G-Chem says, when I first found my clay the other day, I field tested it and it was elastic enough to wrap around my hand, but over time it cracks and broke as I wedged it. Yeah, every clay is different. You're going to have to test it and find out one that works for you. And don't be afraid. I mean, that's just the thing I find people get attached to a clay right away. They're like, this is this is my clay. I found this in my backyard. I found this on my grandfather's farm. I dug it up on the street that leads to my house, and I want to make this work. Don't become attached to your clay until you know that's the clay you want, right? So, if you find a clay, a wild clay, and you find and it doesn't work good, it cracks when it dries, for example, or it starts falling apart when you wedge it, or it warps in the firing, right? Don't be afraid to try a different clay, right? Don't get attached to it. Move on, because all clays are different, and every clay is going to react differently. And if clay A doesn't work for you, clay C will, clay D will. Just keep looking. There's clays everywhere. So this is what I find is a lot of people, they want to make this clay work really bad, and sometimes it just doesn't work. It's just not good clay. Best thing to do is to keep looking. Okay. Okay. Are you speaking Celsius when you're talking about temps? Yes. Jay Sav asked me if I'm speaking Celsius. I always talk Celsius when I say temperatures, and I know that confuses some of you that are Fahrenheit. But before I started really paying attention to the temperatures in my firing, I was reading archaeological publications, and that's where I was getting information about temperatures. And so I'm always comparing to the archaeological publications because I'm trying to replicate ancient pottery. And so the archaeological literature is all written in Celsius, and that's why I think that way. Ambient, like room temperature, I think Fahrenheit, but pottery temperatures, I think Celsius. So, Abbas Duman says, why do so many commercial clays burn at higher temps than natural clay? Why do many commercial clays burn at higher temps than? I don't know. They're just formulated that way, I guess. I don't have much experience with commercial clay. Kenna Pennington, how do you know what type of temper to add to your wild clay? Just any temper is probably fine, Kenna, especially if you're just testing it. Sand works great. If you want, diatomaceous earth is real fine. It's not going to be as gritty as sand. If you're throwing it on a wheel, the diatomite might be easier on your hands than sand. It doesn't matter. Just use something. Some of the Native Americans in my area historically used manure, cow manure. Almost anything will work. John, is there anything you need to do differently when collecting clay by the ocean? I have zero experience collecting clay by the ocean, okay? But I would think ocean clay would be salty. And, salt in your pottery is not good. It can cause, like a salt scum on the surface and stuff. So I would rinse it, maybe rinse the salt out of it. Some of the playa clay, playas are dry lake beds here in the Southwest. Some of the playa clay in my area is very salty, and I'll run it through a couple of rinses of water to kind of leach some of that salt out before I use it. JSav, Google does temp conversion easy. Yeah, that's right. You can always do the temperature conversion on Google. I always talk in Celsius, and sometimes it confuses people, because I don't say Celsius, and I should, so I apologize. Okay, so let's talk about the next part of this. We talked about workability. We talked about fires well. Here's some clay. This is on the side of a hill, and you can see it kind of has vegetation now too, so it's not like a lot of places where I collect in Arizona where it's just exposed, right? This is some brown clay that's in the side of a hill. You can find clay anywhere. You can see these boulders and stuff around, and grass covering the ground, but I knew there was clay in the area because I'd seen it on the road up above. So I just dug down in there. I just probed in with my rock hammer. It's actually a mason's hammer. And you can see that those kind of angular chunks that clay forms in there. And that's a dead giveaway that it's clay. So this is another example of what clay looks like in the wild. And you just got to get out there and, look around. Now, let's talk about, one of the main things when you're looking for a clay to use, for your everyday pottery building or whatever, ease of access is critical. I've had some very good clays that I loved very much in the past that are just way out in the middle of nowhere. So I'd pick my 5-gallon bucket and I'd trudge across the country, a mile and a half with a 5-gallon bucket. You fill that bucket with clay, it's heavy. And it might be, the first 100 yards might not be any big deal. By the time you get back to your car, you're like, because a 5-gallon bucket full of clay is heavy. And I've even pulled the handles off. Those bales, after a couple miles, sometimes they'll pop right out of there. And then you're carrying it around like this. Not fun. So, near a road, close to a road, on a road, those are important. Those are important things for your clay collecting. It's got to be accessible, right? In the middle of nowhere, I'm to the point now where if I see really good clay and I'm, a half a mile or more from the road, I won't even take a sample back because I don't want to like it. If I like it, then I'm going to be forced to go out there. I'm going to make myself go out there and collect it later and bring it back. And there's good clays near the road. There's no need for that. So this is one I got up in central Arizona this summer near the Mogollon Rim. And it's right on a gravel road, Forest Service road. So excellent place to collect. This whole hillside is just layers and layers of clay. Super fun. You can just go through there and sample different colors, different textures, and right on the road. That's really the dream, isn't it? It's not always the case, but it's what we're after. I'll show you another one. This is my workshop out by my property by the Chiricahua Mountains back in March. This is John. Can't think of his name. He's from Michigan. John. Anyway, it's skipping my mind. But we're collecting clay, right? This is a county road over here in the background. You can just see the county road. And this spot, it's not where he's collecting. It kind of looks like the road, but it's not the road. It's like where the grader has pushed off the road so that the water will drain away from the road. It's where the grader, made a little drainage. And there's red clay all through there. So, these are great places to collect clay if you can find them in places like this. And here's one on a paved road. This is down in Duncan, Arizona, near the Gila River. And see all those layers, those horizontal layers? That's a great place to look for clay. All those exposed layers of clay there. And right on a paved road, that's a dream. That's a dream come true because that's easy to access. Now, the other thing to think about accessibility is, proximity to your house. It could be right on a paved road, but if it's 500 miles away, I've driven long distances for clay in the past. And that's another thing. I kind of make myself, for the most part, I will not collect clay more than 4 hours from home because I don't want to be like, oh man, I really want some more of that really great clay. So you got to hop in your car and drive half a day to collect it and then half a day back. And with gas prices and everything, that's just ridiculous. So generally, I don't collect clay. I don't even take samples home from far away from home or from, far away from the road. It's just good practice. Jesse Klein, how do you mean by rinse the clay? Okay, so Jesse, the clay's in like a bucket. I'll pour water, I'll cover the clay with water, let it soak a little bit, mix it up, or something. But then I pour the water off and I change the water. I put more water in it, let it set for a little bit, pour the water off, pour more water in it. So I'm rinsing it. I'm basically rinsing it. Same way you'd rinse, pasta, right? You pour water in, you pour water off, you pour water in. Bobby says, or be like me and carry my clay on my head. Yeah, I've got video of Bobby carrying clay on his head, actually. But yeah, you can't take out too much, Bobby, on your head. You're kind of limited for how much weight you can carry. Pat Master, please hit the like button to support the channel as much as possible. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, guys, you should totally do that. So, hit the like button, and that would help me very much. And if you haven't already subscribed, think about it. All right, let me go to the next slide here. This is an example. I was looking for white clay here in the southern Southwest. So sometimes when you're looking for clay, you're looking for a certain color, especially when you're trying to make a certain prehistoric pottery type, right? You have to have white clay or you have to have red clay to match what's found in the archaeological record. So I would actually use Google Earth, and I would look all over for those colors. Any place there was white, then I would hike out and find it. And in doing so, I got samples from some very remote locations. This is one of those. This is 1.5 miles from the road, and as you can see, it's pretty rugged country. And then you get out there, and then you like it. Then I have to go back. Not only is it's a long drive up a dirt road, and then it's a long hike in, and then you're carrying it out on your back. Not really optimal. This is right in Tucson, so these drainage ditches. It's a good place to see those horizontal strata, and you can see that on the other side, those kind of horizontal layers of clay. This is right on the Santa Cruz floodplain, so those are layers that floodwaters have laid down, and some of those are in fact clay. So that's a great spot. It might be a little bit of a hike, down the ditch and up the bank, but it's not too far. You can drive real close, load it up. You could take several buckets out of there. And the other thing is, it's one of those spots where nobody's going to care. If a cop came along and saw you digging clay out of that bank, they're not going to make a big deal out of it. It's just dirt in a bank, right? And nobody's going to really concern themselves with it. So that's a great place to get clay if you can. And some of these kind of places, that's actually me way up there. So again, you got all those horizontal layers. You could have clay in there. So there's no way I'm not going to go explore those layers and see if there's clay. And there was a nice green clay up there. But, ooh, that is a steep hill. It's really not a good place to be getting clay on a regular basis. And this is just an example of some a clay deposit. Got those angular chunks again. You've got that kind of brownish patina on the clay, which you get a lot in that underground clay deposit. So that brown patina. It's a great example of what clay looks like in the wild. Ren Pixie, hey Bobby, love the video you did with Andy. Pap Master Tucson. Oh, are you from Tucson, Pap? C. Goulart, hi Andy, we're still sitting on that clay we collected from southern Arizona. We're going to temper it with sparkly schist. Have you tried firing it yet? I'm not sure what clay you're talking about, C. Goulart. So sometimes people's YouTube names confuse me because I probably know you, but I have no idea who you are. So you got to help me out. All right, I'm sorry about that. Sparkly schist is good. I don't know if I'd tried it yet because I don't remember what clay we're talking about. J. Sav, wearing a hard hat and an orange vest when you collect clay, no one will second guess. That's true. Look like a construction worker. Nobody will say. I have literally talked to cops collecting clay more than once. Parked on the interstate highway to collect clay, and you will attract, highway patrol, state troopers or whatever to see if you're okay. Like they think you're broken down. And I'm not sure about the legality. I'm not sure you're allowed to just park on the interstate and, and hike out into the country, but I've done that, right? So I've talked to state troopers before and they didn't care. I've talked to county sheriffs before. Like one time I was coming back with a 5-gallon bucket, 1.5 miles, over hill and dale, carrying this stupid bucket. And I get close to my car and I can see there's a cop parked next to it. And I'm like, oh geez, this is what I need. And he's like, what are you doing? And so I had explained to him what I was doing. And it was just an area where there was a lot of illegal border crossing. So there were illegal immigrants, there were drug runners, and they were just looking to see if I was picking up a shipment of drugs. And he saw my bucket full of dirt, and he's like, yeah, whatever. So I have talked to law enforcement, and I've never had a problem. Forest Service the same way. Like just this summer, I was collecting clay on the side of that road, the same road I showed you in that earlier slide. And I was digging in there and filling buckets, and a Forest Service car comes by, and I'm like, oh. I used to work for the Forest Service, so I know the rules out there, and I know that how much of a hard time they give you really depends on who you talk to, right? Like they have a lot of discretion. They may decide to give you a hard time, or they may decide to not give you a hard time. So I didn't know what to expect, but really on the side of that road cut, I wasn't doing any damage. I wasn't hurting anything. She obviously didn't care because she just kept on going. So, so far I've never had any problems. I don't collect on private land without permission. I don't collect on public land where I'm not allowed, like national parks, places, places where it's not allowed. BLM and Forest Service, you are allowed to do, what do they call it? Rock hounding. You're allowed to collect a small amount of minerals for personal use. But that's not everywhere, right? There's pieces of Bureau of Land Management land here in southern Arizona, like out at the San Pedro Riparian Conservation Area, where you're not allowed to take minerals. So, it depends. You have to kind of know the laws. And I'm going to get into that in a second. Oh, Christina and Marissa. Oh, certainly. Let's see, what clay did we collect, Chris? We didn't collect clay in that class. What? Something you brought me, maybe. Because we didn't collect clay in that class, Christina. Yeah. And Wes says, talk to landscapers, construction, excavation people. They may know where clay is. Yeah, construction sites are a good place to look. And a lot of times construction workers, they'll know, oh, yeah, we hit a big bunch of clay back here. Or like road workers, for sure. Chris in Kansas West, probably. Deb, the land you are not allowed to remove clay from. What land are you not allowed to remove clay from? Yeah, so, private land, you want to have permission from the landowner. Public land, you need to know what the agency's rules are. Jay says, just be careful. You can get into trouble for causing erosion if you run into a cop on a bad day. Yeah, like I said, Jay, I know that's the case. I've never have had that issue. Almost got arrested for digging obsidian in a road cut. Wow. Well, you never know. Santa Cruz County. Oh, yeah. You're talking about down there by the San Rafael Valley. No, I didn't even collect any that day. I do not need any red clay. I have a really good red clay source that goes back to what I'm talking about in this video or in this live stream is, accessibility, right? So I've got a really good red clay I collect that's close to home, close to Tucson. It's on Old Sonoyta Highway. So it's maybe a half hour, 40 minutes from my house. So when I saw that clay down in the San Rafael Valley, I took a picture of it because I wanted to share it on social media, but I didn't take any clay home because I don't need a red clay from that far away. I've got a good red clay that's a lot closer to home. So, no, I've never tried it, but I'd be glad to hear what you do with it. Okay, back to my presentation. So we did easy to process, workability, fires well, easy to access, legally accessible is the next one. So that's really the next point to make is legally accessible. So no trespassing signs. I as a general rule, okay, because I have gone past no trespassing signs. I'm not going to tell you I haven't, but as a general rule, I don't go past no trespassing signs to collect clay. I don't want trouble with people. I don't want some grumpy rancher coming out and yelling at me. All they're really, if you trespass, and there's laws vary from state to state and country to country, but in Arizona, if you trespass and there's no trespassing sign, all they can do is tell you to leave. If they've already told you to leave and you went in, then they can charge you with trespassing. If you went past a no trespassing sign, and they can charge you with trespassing. So, those are the laws. You need to know the laws, but you don't want to steal clay. There's too much other clay, reservation land, right? I've had people more than once tell me, oh, there's some good clay out on the reservation. Just go up this road and turn there. And I'm like, I'm not collecting clay from the reservation unless I have a member of that tribe with me in the car, because I don't want that kind of trouble. And the same, like National Park Service, no. Bureau of Land Management, most places BLM you can collect minerals, but not everywhere. And it depends on where, right? So like if I'm digging down right through the middle of a bunch of grass or tree roots to get to clay, and they're going to have a problem with that because I'm damaging the plants. If I'm getting it on BLM or Forest Service out of a road cut or a wash bank, they're not going to have a problem because I'm not really disturbing, the plants and animals. So use some discretion. Be smart. Don't make a mess of things, because if you do, even if they don't charge you, you don't want to be grumpy. They're not going to want you back. You want them to say, if you go back and get clay there all the time, you want them to say, oh, that's so-and-so. He's here all the time collecting clay. He doesn't do any harm. He's a good guy. You know what I mean? That's what you want. This is the Gila River up in central Arizona. This is near Florence and Coolidge. And there's a lot of just wasteland around the Gila. It's loaded with gravel pits out there and some farmlands and lots of gravel pits. And it's a mess. It's ugly. This used to be a beautiful spot, and it's just been ruined by man. But because it's all gross, nobody cares if you go out there and dig clay. And this is all like kind of crackly clay that's been laid down you can see the crackly texture on this ground here. And it's a great place to go find and dig clay because nobody gives a hoot if you're out there digging holes, because look at it. It's already ruined, right? I don't know who owns it. Maybe private land, maybe public, but nobody cares. It's just all gross, destroyed land. So, and this is the spot that Bobby called the Cow Ranch up near Blanding, Utah. We collected clay up there. You can see that crackled texture all through here, kind of reds and browns and greens, and there's a little small patch of white clay that we collected here, and it turned out good. This is the clay that Bobby's been using to make his black on white pottery, and so it's been working really good for him. And this is another great example of just, and it was right off of a dirt road. We drove almost to it, and then we just walked 50 yards or something to collect the clay. This is a great spot, and I believe this was all BLM land up there. Those of you that aren't in the United States, or live back east or something, BLM stands for Bureau of Land Management. They own lots of public land out here in the West. Okay, let me go back to the the questions really quick. Oh, I got all this junk popping up. Get out of here. Okay, I'm gonna get to your questions. Hold on. Three Froggies. What happens when wild clay freezes? I'm from Canada and use river clay, which is frozen solid at the moment. Yeah, nothing bad. You're going to have to re-knead it because it's going to be all kind of broke apart from the freezing. There'll be like little sections where it's disconnected. But once it thaws out, just knead it real good. It'll be fine. It doesn't damage it in any way. I mean, in nature, on the surface, clay freezes constantly. C. Gillard, got a bucket full. Keep you posted. Yeah, I'd be glad to see how that turns out for you. Not only how it does for building, whether it has good workability, but also what color it fires, because you might be surprised. Abbas Duman, how do you know the destination of the found clay is private land? Is private land always fenced? No. You can get land ownership maps. Here in the western United States, BLM maps are really good for showing land ownership, so they'll have state land and Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, and Park Service land, all, military land, all marked by different colors. So that's a good place to start. And some states have land ownership maps where you can kind of online, you can go in and see, the land ownership. I know Arizona has some of those, and New Mexico does as well. So you have to, it varies from place to place, but sometimes you have to do a little research. Forest Service maps also show land ownership, but they only cover Forest Service areas, whereas you can get a BLM map for any place in like the western United States. J. Sav, that's a good question, common sense. Goncalo Barroso, does wild clay get slimy when we put in the microwave? I don't put my clay in the microwave. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I know you can somebody told me the last live stream that you can fire pottery in the microwave, but I think those are special microwaves. Anyways, I don't know nothing about that. My clay never comes near well, I mean, if I make a pot out of it, I can microwave it, sure. But that's after it's fired, right? Are you talking about before it's fired, I assume? I don't know. Alexander, put up a sign in your car with a Gone Collecting Clay with your channel logo. I've got stickers for sale on, I think they're down below in the little merch shelf for caution, I break for clay, something like that, which I thought was kind of clever. Diana Westrup, hi from Cancun, Mexico. Hey Diana, how are things in Cancun? I bet it's nice this time of year. My sister lives down in Tulum, Mexico, and she said, this time of year is gorgeous down there. Jay says, I've seen someone fire small pots in a microwave kiln. Yeah, I've heard they do it, but I don't know anything about it. So let me get back real quick. We did legally accessible. Let's talk about impurities real quick then. What do we got, about 10 minutes left? So, this is another example of great place to find clay. Sometimes you find it right in the road. This is that spot, Christina, out there in the San Rafael Valley. This is that spot where you collected clay in Santa Cruz County. So you can see the crackled texture right in the roadbed. You can see that it's holding on to those car tracks. Somebody drove through there when it was wet and kind of sunk in. Those are all good indicators that there's clay here. And you can dig the clay right next to the road. I mean, don't dig a pothole in the road for people. I won't appreciate that. But off on the side a little bit, nobody's going to care if you dig clay next to a road. It's just wasteland anyway. Here's a good example of a clay bed, in the side of a hill. You see those angular chunks, that nice smooth texture. That way you know it's clay. Another thing you want is you don't want impurities. So some of you might have seen my recent video about Caliche. This is that same spot down there where I filmed that. So you've got clay, you've got like a reddish brown clay above it, and then you've got Caliche right below it. And then in among those Caliche bed, if you look carefully, there's kind of a grayish brown clay kind of interspersed in among that Caliche. So you've got to make sure you don't have too much or any Caliche in your clay if you can help it. And if you're digging someplace like this, you got to be real careful, because those little nodules will be all over in there. So you gotta look out for impurities. Caliche, anything else that's going to cause like pops or spalls. So like gypsum. Some of the places where I collect clay, there's selenite crystals, which is gypsum crystals, and those will cause spalls too. Too much salt in your clay. You don't want limestone in your clay. So there's a lot of things you got to watch out for that you don't want. Some of the places here in Tucson where I get my temper, sand that I use for temper, has a little specks of pyrite in it. Pyrite is fool's gold, right? And in the firing, those will make little pops in my pottery, because at a certain temperature, that pyrite will off-put sulfur gases, and it'll make little pops. So be aware, that you don't want that. So that's most of the considerations. So they are easy to process, workability, fires well, easy to access, legally accessible, and minimal impurities. You got those. You probably, you've got those all sorted out. You've probably got a pretty good clay. The only other thing you might consider is colors of clay. So sometimes you're looking for a particular type of clay. Like I said, I've used Google Maps a lot to look at the aerial photography to identify where certain colors are. This is a white clay that's up in northern Arizona. You can see this on Google Maps. I mean, that's just white shining up at the sun. And look at that crackled texture. It tells you it's clay. So I've spent a lot of time. I've spent a good part of my life looking for white clay, because the type of pottery I've been wanting to make my whole life is Salado polychrome. And it's made with white clay, and there's just little to no white clay here in southern Arizona. So white clay is my thing. I know something about finding it. Red clay, maybe you're making something, you want some red, you're looking for a red slip, or you're looking for some red clay. And again, Google Maps really can help with that. Sometimes you find very dark, almost black clay. This is a black clay from here in the Tucson area. Well, maybe it's not exactly black. It's very dark brown, but in the right lighting, this looks very, very black. But the other thing to remember about the colors of clay is that it may look one way, and then it may fire something entirely different. And that's the case with these black clays. The black is usually organic matter that's going to burn out in the firing. So we don't know. This could come out of the firing white. It could come out red. It could come out brown, gray. I mean, you just don't know with the dark colors, because that's organic matter that's going to burn away. Up at Zuni, where Bobby lives, they have a black clay, just as black as like charcoal, that fires white. So you just never know. And so when I'm looking for a specific color, I'll go out and I'll collect just a little Ziploc bag of clay. And I bring a Sharpie with me. I always write on where I got it from. That way, I can go back. And then, now I have to test all this clay, right? I mean, just having it isn't enough. You come back from a clay collecting trip and you have this many baggies. You've got some work lined up for you, right? Just doing all the testing. So, sometimes I'll paint them on tiles. A lot of times I'll make a little cylinder or a cup, small bowl, maybe paint on the inside of a bowl. And then I'm painting a little slip of each of these clays on different parts and then firing it to see how it fires. You're testing how badly does it crackle in the firing. A lot of slips will crackle real bad in a firing, right? What color does it come out of the firing? How well does it hold paint? Some paints stick well to certain slips, some not to another. So lots of questions when you've got new, especially colored clays that you're trying to figure out. And then my last photo is just a really nice clay bed. This was down by Safford, Arizona. And you can just see how creamy that clay looks. Now that's dry. Those are hard like rocks, but it's really smooth. You can see it. And it's got that crackled texture and that kind of creamy consistency. It just looks good. And this is a spot where I saw this clay and I said, man, that looks good. That looks like good clay. But I didn't take any back with me because I'd hiked down this really steep hill to get there. And I was like, if I like it, I'm going to have to come back. I'm going to kill myself just trying to get this out of here. So a lot of times I'll see clay and I won't touch it because if I like it, I'll want to come back. So I don't even take it home with me. I just don't want to be tempted. Okay? Okay, where are we at on the questions here? Can you test for lead content? Ren Pixie, good question, but I don't know. Yeah, you probably can, but I don't know anything about that. I've never done it. Message is held for review. I don't see that as being a problem there, Pap. I don't know why that was held. We made Maude Ortiz inspired pottery here. Awesome. Abbas, how can you differ Caliche from white clay? Oh, acid test. So get yourself a little weak acid, maybe even like vinegar or something, and just put a couple drops on it. If it's clay, it won't fizz. If it has a lot of calcium in it, like Caliche, it will fizz, and that tells you that it's got Caliche in it. A lot of light colored clay here in the southern Southwest, it's light colored because it's loaded with calcium. So that's important. Heidi says, what are spalls? So a spall, you can look a spall up in a dictionary. It's just a word in the English language. It just means a small piece has come off the outside. So usually it'll be a little kind of circular shape, and it's kind of thin. Little piece has sloughed off the outside of the pot. A spall, like little blisters. No, not a blister. It's a hole. It's a piece of pottery that's actually popped off, and they can happen years after the pot's been fired. So you fire the pot, the calcium in the heat of the firing, the calcium turns into calcium carbonate when it's in the clay. In the heat of the firing, a chemical reaction occurs, and it turns into calcium oxide. That calcium oxide can sit inside of the pot, dormant, just sitting, hanging out for years, decades, centuries, and then it gets wet. And it can be atmospheric moisture. Let's say you move to Louisiana and there's a lot of humidity, or the pot gets dirty and you wipe it with a damp rag. Whatever happens, the moisture reacts with that calcium oxide and it causes it to expand. And it's inside the clay body. Now it's expanding. It has to do something. So it'll blow off a piece of the pot. So that is what happens. Heidi. Fancy crafts. Spot where chips come off in the pot. Jay. Little bits popping off your pot. Yep. Three Froggies. Could you make a list of impurities that make pops, etc., and post it? Please, either Wild Clay Club or your channel. Yeah, sure. I mean, that'd be a good thing to do. I wouldn't be averse to that. Diana, I wish I could get some of that white clay. The best Maude Ortiz is with white clay. I just love how it turns. Diana, if you take my online masterclass about wild clay, there's a map. There's a map. You'll get access to a map in there with clay locations all around the Southwest. Diana, if you're in the southwestern United States, you could really use that to find some good white clay. But if you live in New Jersey or something, it probably wouldn't do you much good. But that is a good way to get access to some clay sources here. That would help you. Heidi, no, not natural paint lady. Mistake, excellent question. Granny Goose, Safford, where my dad was raised. You should go visit, Granny. There's a lot of clay there. Elon Monique, do you make pottery from the same clay you get your pigments from? Not generally. Generally, like I said, all clays are different, right? So some clays are really good for forming pots out of, and some clays are not. And so generally the ones that are really good for forming pots tend to be in boring colors like gray or brown. And so I will form the pot out of a clay that has good usability, has wet strength and plasticity and these kind of things. And then I will slip it with maybe a little crummier clay, or clay that's a little farther from the road so I don't have to get as much of it, that's red or white or yellow or something colorful. So the color of the pot isn't always, the property of the clay. I live in Oregon coast and have been looking for it in the wild, but no luck yet. Did you say you think I should dig for it? Well, sometimes, see, you're in Oregon, you're in western Oregon, and there's a lot of vegetation. And so the clay you might be walking over the clay and not aware that it's under your feet because you've got grass and ferns and, whatever stuff growing. So sometimes it's good to kind of probe, beneath the roots and see what's under there. I know there is clay in Oregon. Hi, did you know where in central Mexico I can find one? Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I've only traveled in Sonora, and there's a lot of, and Sonora is a lot like Arizona as far as the clay, but I don't know anything about central Mexico. But somebody might. Oh, you live in the Yucatan. Would have to plan a trip. Thanks for the valuable tip. Yeah, that's where my sister lives. She lives down in the Yucatan. Oh, there was one more thing in my presentation, and that is it's really good if you're trying to find clay, if you can hook up with traditional potters in your area. So people like Bobby Silas, my Hopi friend, people that are involved in native communities where they have a pottery making tradition, they don't have to spend so much time looking for clay as maybe you and I, because there's people in their community who make clay, and they'll tell them where to go, right? Or they've learned from their grandmother or something, and they've shown them where they get their clay. So, they grow up knowing where to get clay, whereas you and I may spend, months or years looking for a good clay source. So if you can find somebody who's a potter in your area, that really helps. So there's a couple of good Facebook groups you might, if you're on Facebook, that you might want to tap into. And there's a lot of potters on there, so you can ask questions like, hey, I'm in Ohio and I'm looking for clay, or right, like I live in central Mexico and I'm looking for clay, and there may be a potter there may be multiple potters there who can help you and say, oh, I'll show you a good spot, come see me, or turn left on Highway 2, right? So there's a group that I operate on Facebook called Primitive Pottery. So if you go to Facebook and look it up, Primitive Pottery, that's my group. Join that, and there's a lot of really excellent potters on there. And then there's another one called the Wild Clay Club, and there's a lot of good potters on there. And in both of these groups, there's potters all over the world, right? So there's people in South Africa, and there's people in Australia, and there's people in India, and so you can, no matter where you're at, you may find potters in your area who know where clay is, and that can really cut down on all the work you have to put in to find clay. All right, let's see. Did I get all the questions answered? Check mine out. Yeah, that's a good tip, Lori. Like clay in Chihuahua. Mata Ortiz. Thanks, Danica. All right, guys. I think I'm going to wrap up. Do we have any other things we need to talk about? Hit the like button for me. I appreciate you all coming along. If you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in. If you don't put them in the chat, but wait and put them in the comments, I can answer them. I think if you put them in the chat, I'm not going to be able to answer them once the live stream goes away. So, but I always answer my comments on my videos. So feel free to leave questions in the comments on my videos. I will answer them. All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you coming along. Catch you next time.